Based on an opening look at the terminal list with the teaser and the trailer, the show overall looks good on its own merits. I knew it was being responded to very well by audiences, given the statements have been made from Amazon specifically, as well as its cast over this production, that the series is now #1 currently on Amazon streaming as we speak. I've been hearing nonstop conversation on it, specifically over the 4th of July weekend. Everyone's talking about the terminal list. I'd wanted to cover it for a very long time, but I did consider maybe the angle wasn't the most serviceable. I did debate, do I cover this preceding reading the book or after it? Currently, I have the audiobook on hold at my local library, and it's like 6 weeks out until I can get a hold of it. So I'm like, okay, I want to cover this with a fresh lens. I want to see a new Amazon show, especially one that has such promise, like with Chris Pratt. He's an immediate attractant for me, even beyond all the unknowns to the show going in that I had. I will pretty much watch anything the guy's in. I love seeing him. He's a fabulous actor. I have a lot of respect for him as a Christian, I like seeing out of the big pool of celebrities these days in Hollywood a real role model male figure. And Chris Pratt certainly embodies that, not only in this role, which I think he personalizes the physicality and the overall character of a wounded soldier very well. But I think the series, even on its own accord, establishes a very sophisticated story. The execution of it being a military political thriller looks excellent. Anton Fuqua was involved. There's a lot of reverence behind his name. I've actually covered some of his productions in the past that have shown a lot of promise, and I think the terminal list is probably another win for him, as well as many of its cast members, not just Chris Pratt, but also Constance Wu, Taylor Kitsch, who I've been a fan of for a long time, as well as Jai Courtney. This looks like a great series overall. It's landed very well with audiences. Not as much with critics, although these days, again, the critic's word is pretty much meaningless at this point. It seems to be most people respond more to the audience feedback, which again has been nothing short of exemplary. And again, I think part of that animus that's been driven up in the media happens to be on, and I've mentioned this in the previous video, there's a lot of unreasonable hatred surrounding Chris Pratt. Most audiences, like myself, really don't give it any two shreds of credibility, because most of it, if you've actually read in some of the cases, I'll link the stories down below, as well as in the comment section, like I did with the first video. If you're curious to see maybe the animus that's been driven up, half of it is just absurd exaggerations and lies. There are also some pretty brutal statements that people have made, some real untruths, and it's shocking to see and even Chris Pratt said this in a recent interview. I forget the specific outlet, but this was mentioned in a quote that he has seen at least some of the feedback, and for anybody, I'm sure, because of what was brought up, it was certain allegations pertaining to his son and former marriage. It was ridiculous. It's like there's no basis to it, and it was bordering on cruel. But again, a lot of people have been running with it. There's been a lot of flack, it seems, from critics on the show, but again, audiences, this show has landed very well, and I can even see as an audience member the respectable portrayal on many different layers of not just a good story overall, but as a military political thriller, it looks like it's going to excel. And I did say, covering the storyline first with when we looked at the synopsis in the first video, there were some elements of conventionality, I felt, with other military political thriller projects, but I think the story on its own, in terms of execution and the cast and everything I'm seeing based on the teaser and trailer, really stands on its own strengths. But I like to get the best window possible, especially for someone like me who isn't familiar with the book. I really wanted to be going in advance with this. It's similar to, although the situation will be different, I'm going to cover Reacher after I read the book, because I just, in fact, today, I got a hold on that finally delivered. Now I can borrow the audiobook. So I'm going to listen to that first, I think, for the first book, and then I'm going to cover Reacher, because I've also heard, like the Terminal List, that series landed very well too. But let's go ahead and take a look at maybe you're like me, and you don't have that knowledge base with the Terminal List. I like to cover featurettes on this channel when it comes to TV series, film. I like to get the behind-the-scenes perspective, because it's one thing to appreciate a show on the cinematic or TV screen lens. It's another thing to get a deep dive with the cast, the crew, and to understand the vision of the show. And in a case like this, this serving as a book adaptation, it's nice to see how the cast felt in regard to the process of bringing that storyline to the screen. When I've heard, again, from certain feedback from audiences that this is apparently very faithful to the book adaptation. Let's go ahead and take a look at, we'll get to that second featurette in a minute. That one's more specific to the book. But there was this short promo that I saw, Perspective is Everything. I'm wondering if maybe this points to certain aspects of the show. maybe the events of a storyline, and that, again, it's a sordid military affair for the soldier Chris Pratt's playing, where he needs a clarification on what exactly happened overseas to unravel this plot that's been happening. Without further ado, I'm going to pull this up, and we can get a perspective. On what exactly is going on with the show, if that is the implication of the specific ad. Maybe either way, it's just a good advert.
Lieutenant Commander James Reese, can you outline the details of your mission?
Watch your back!
This was a targeted attack. My timeline is a little fuzzy, but they knew we were coming.
I bet the series, and this is just a hypothesis of mine, but it's going to integrate the flashbacks, sort of like revealed memories.
Headaches, paranoia, memory confusion.
It was a setup.
Hard brutality of war, but this is, again, very well executed. It's a great ad, too.
I think I'm losing my mind.
Great promotional material. Really going to engage, I think, well with audiences.
It's David versus Goliath.
Which one is Reese? David or Goliath?
I'm still working that out.
Really good scripting. I'm curious to find out if that's actually a line from the book. That looks sufficient. It really looks like a good show. And again, I'm thinking the perspective specifically is within what exactly are authentic memories, what's not. And from what I said based on the first trailer, there was a shot in particular that was very indicative of like a PTSD type situation. If you've seen other films along this type of vein with military storylines, you're very familiar with the way maybe the scene is set up. But it looked well done. And I think the way that they're handling this, maybe portraying, I might be right, I might be wrong on this, but portraying the flashback moments as repressed memories that are being unearthed, that's a wonderful idea. Let's go ahead and get a perspective, though, on the book. There's a specific featurette called Book Legacy. So we can see, perhaps, from the film crew just how much they cared about the book. And again, like I've stated, that's been a line that audiences have been running with in terms of coverage that I've seen, that this book and the movie are very intertwined in their vision, where it's not necessarily of an adaptation that distances itself from the book in certain regards in the storyline. It seems like, from what I've seen, both are very well married together. And, adaptations across the board, no translation is perfect, in that when you translate from one storyline framing to another, for example, if you're taking a book to a movie, there are specific... I think it's better, though, with streaming, because a book is considerably longer, and streaming series has much more of runtime to play with than it would otherwise be a film. But usually with a film, there are certain exceptions having made in regard to the pacing, the time constraints, perhaps the budget, the overall drama of the piece. Oftentimes you see with novels, there are lots of cuts made, especially if they're being adapted to, like a 2-hour window. This, I think with a streaming series, there's more time to flesh out the story. There are probably less constraints. But let's see. Let's see what the cast perspective was, or the cast and the crew, in regard to bringing the story to the TV screen. Storytelling in a new form.
I was doing Zero Dark 30 and met Jared Shaw, former Navy SEAL.
I was a BUDS instructor. That's where you do Hell Week and all that. Chris came out there and we hit it off.
Long live the brotherhood.
Jack
I heard
Carr,
something about
friend of
this.
his, they knew each other through teams. And
So they got
of course,
people
were
involved in the
terminal,
process of being a
and
Navy
I
SEAL
thought it would
immediately,
make
so it's a
it
very faithful adaptation, not just on the book, but in its realistic portrayal.
Can you outline the details of your mission?
There's a difference between telling a story on the page and telling that same story visually. I just want the best people involved and let them do what they do best.
Never set.
Jack Carr is an amazing, intelligent writer. He was invaluable to make sure it was authentic.
The focus on detail and the
So
way
they brought
he
in the
sees
writer.
things
That's good.
is incredible.
Chris called me.
Most translations
and
do,
said,
some
"Let's get into
don't.
a bidding war of this thing. Let's just do it together."
Men who killed my friends and family are not going to prison.
For me as the author, it's a dream come true.
I imagine for every storyteller it is to envision your story and then to be involved. It's not just like you're watching on screen for the first time, but then to actually see that process played out with your involvement. I would imagine for him, that was just such a surreal experience, being able to have that input of maybe this is what I envisioned for the character when I wrote it. If maybe something wasn't necessarily clarified the best in the novel. Although, again, with the novel, I've also heard considerable feedback that it's very well received. But if there is a certain element in regard to what the author envisioned that perhaps in the filming process, or just even in any of the actors or directors best trying to flesh out said elements, right? To get that perspective of what the author was going for, so that it is, in the truest sense, parallel to the book. I'm sure he just really cherished that moment. Looks good. Again, I think there's a lot of potential from what I've heard from audience feedback. I don't give the critics really any shred of credibility in terms of their perspective, because there's always other agendas with them. But with audiences, they're much more, I think, realistic in their observations. And audiences have really flocked to this show, as well as the book. I want to read the book. I haven't yet, but the show immediately looks good for me. I've wanted to check out more Amazon content that Morven delivers, and I think similar to the response to The Tomorrow War, which I know some people, among audiences, had critical remarks in regard to its quality, but it was still a very well-received film. The Terminal List, I think, is superior in the feedback that I've heard to The Tomorrow War, even though, again, The Tomorrow War was generally accepted. The Terminal List is, I've heard about it, is always spoken of in very high regard. And I can see the potential based on, again, first impression with these small little adverts I've seen of the show and small clips. I think it looks good. There's enough reason for, beyond even just the Chris Pratt casting, there's enough here for the series to really think it's going to engage with me. What are your guys' thoughts with The Terminal List? Let me know down below on what maybe at this point you've already seen the show. I know I'm covering it a bit late, because I did debate, again, what timing do I cover this? Do I read the book first, or do I watch the series? Situationally, based on the fact that I'm still waiting for the book to come to through my library, or the audiobook, it was just a situation like, I'm going to cover this in advance, but maybe I'll watch it in advance. I don't know yet. I'm definitely going to watch the series at some point. I'm not sure when yet. I'm curious what you would recommend. Let me know down below. For those of you who have seen the show, maybe you've read the book, what would you best recommend to me? Maybe because this series seems to be such a faithful adaptation to the book, I can read the book second, and it will feel closely linked. I don't know. Let me know down below what your thoughts are, or your opinion on that. But as far as the series goes, I'm immediately grabbed to see it. I think it looks good. A lot of potential. Audience feedback has definitely provided a promising road in terms of acceptance of the project for me. Looks like it Morven delivers. I'm very happy to check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.